Believe it or not, conspiracy theories have been part of our culture for well over half a century, but one of the most enduring, and one which mutated into current day hullabaloos such as QAnon, had its seeds right here in New Orleans, and it connects JFK, Playboy magazine, and a little gang that you might just have heard of called the Illuminati. The story starts in the late 1950s, not in LA, but in LA, where two old friends would often meet up at a suburban bowling alley. Greg Hill and Kerry Thornley were both interested in esoteric science and the nature of reality, and they would often talk late into the night about existential theories of reality and possibly how to improve their bowling scores. In the early morning hours, after a few drinks and perhaps a healthy toot or two on the odd jaybird, they often talked about setting up a fake religion of their own. In the early 1960s, Hill and Thornley left Los Angeles and relocated to the French Quarter in New Orleans. Amid the cultural carnival of the Crescent City in the 60s, their ideas began to take shape. Unbeknownst to them at the time though, a strange set of unforeseen coincidences would see things unravel in a much more dramatic way than either of them could have imagined. They began an organisation that they named Discordianism. It was half performance art project and half a cultural movement, and it rejected both main political parties. Hill and Thornley thought that both Republicans and Democrats were both sides of the same coin, trying to control people's perceptions of reality, and their aim was to disrupt that control. Discordianism, as the name suggests, believed in cosmic disorder. Most religions ask, what if everything is connected? Discordianism asked, what if nothing is connected? Discordians nominally worship Eris, the Greek goddess of, you've guessed it, discord. You may even recognise the name Eris as one of our own city's Mardi Gras crews. The crew of Eris is an open walking crew, mixing anarchic, hedonistic and idealistic tendencies. It's a fun, peace-loving group that pays tribute to the goddess's legend. In the original Greek myth, Eris gets mad at not being invited to a wedding on Mount Olympus, and so she throws a golden apple into the celebrations, inscribed with a provocative message, successfully sowing discord in the group chat between the goddesses who were invited. Such mischievous acts of chaos were the inspiration for Greg Hill and Kerry Thornley, and they began to run with the idea. They built a world around their theories from their home in the French Quarter, even going as far as to give their movement its own foundational text, called the Principia Discordia. It was a fairly loose collection of esoteric musings, and differed from other religious texts in that followers of Discordianism were enthusiastically encouraged to add their own content, much like a kind of pre-internet Wikipedia. Every Discordian was considered a ruler within the organisation, whereas famous local politician Huey P. Long said, every man a king, Hill and Thornley said, every person a pope. Hill and Thornley had friends called Robert Anton Wilson and Robert Shea, who at the time had the enviable job of editing the letters section of Playboy magazine. By the mid-late 1960s, conspiracy theories were really starting to take off, many of them as a reaction to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in November 1963. With the help of Hill and Thornley, Wilson and Shea started to publish some of the most outlandish theories that they received at the magazine, even mixing in some that they had just made up themselves. It became a kind of secret but mostly harmless propaganda wing of Discordianism. This was all part of what I will call on this family channel Operation Mindflip. The operation consisted of inserting references to the Illuminati into any part of popular culture that they had access to, suggesting that a secretive elite were controlling everything from world wars to the weather, all from behind the scenes. Now, the Bavarian Illuminati was a real historic group, but they were mainly just some well-meaning 18th century academics who wanted to promote the science and rationality that had grown out of the Renaissance. That group was quickly outlawed by the Church of the day, but they were resurrected by the Discordians and assigned a new, covert, shadowy character, one that's more in line with the way that we imagine them today. Hill, Thornley, Wilson and Shea planted stories about the Illuminati in the underground press, as well as into mainstream media whenever they had the chance. They wanted to see just how much they could influence people's common perceptions of reality. Operation Mindflip ramped up when an actual secret investigation into the JFK assassination began right here in New Orleans. In 1968, the city had an ambitious but paranoid district attorney called Jim Garrison. Garrison did not trust the official accounts of what happened in Dallas on that fateful afternoon. He strongly suspected a cover-up involving underground organisations, and since some of the crucial segments of the actual case fell within his jurisdiction, he initiated his own covert investigation. The crucial segments here, of course, refer to Lee Harvey Oswald, who had lived in New Orleans for some time before the assassination. By strange coincidence, Kerry Thornley and Oswald had earlier been conscripted into the same unit of the US Marine Corps. Oswald had been a notable character even back then, with left-leaning tendencies that would have his colleagues joke about him being a communist. Thornley was so intrigued by Oswald that he had written a novel with a character that was overtly based on him. The book was called The Idle Warriors, and the story concerned a disaffected American Marine who defected to the USSR, something that Oswald eventually did. D.A. Garrison didn't believe anything as boring as proof. He said that facts were impossible to establish because the elite was so cunning, and since nothing could ever be proven, you just had to try and spot real-world patterns. You could say that the entire investigation was based on vibes. Even though Thornley's book was published 3 years before the Kennedy assassination, this was more than enough proof for Garrison and his theory of patterns, and he accused Thornley and the Discordians of being part of a CIA-led conspiracy to kill the president. Thornley and the Discordians, Garrison alleged, had framed Lee Harvey Oswald as the lone gunman, and that Kerry Thornley was in fact the second Oswald. Simultaneously entertained and outraged by the ridiculous nature of these allegations, Kerry Thornley, who now went by the title Lord Omar Khayyam Ravenhurst, Greg Hill, now known as Malaclips the Younger, and their Discordian colleagues, started to inundate Garrison's DA office with bizarre letters and messages, signed by the Bavarian Illuminati, just to provoke and confuse him. This entire hubbub evolved into a spiral of codependent paranoia, both D.A. Garrison and Kerry Thornley each feeding off each other's misplaced fantasies. Thornley sadly fell victim to his own practices in the end, descending into acute neurosis, deciding that everyone was a secret government agent, including even his former friends Robert Anton Wilson and Robert Shea. Things had escalated to such an extent that even the mind flippers were getting mind flipped. Discordianism had, by now, established itself as an underground movement beyond the control of Greg Hill and Kerry Thornley. By 1975, Robert Anton Wilson and Robert Shea had even turned the ideas into a series of novels called Illuminatus. In the books, a fictional world is controlled by the sinister and evil Illuminati, who are harvesting humanity's energy to revitalise a hidden elite. Opposing them were the heroic Discordians, also known as the Justified Ancients of Mumu. Much to the delight of the Discordian society, the Illuminati narrative gained traction, first within psychedelic culture, then slowly making its way into fringe political activism, before eventually becoming more and more popular. Today, even if we don't believe in the Illuminati, the idea of them is very much in the mainstream, and thanks in part to the internet, it has infiltrated modern-day phenomena such as previously noted, QAnon. Greg Hill eventually moved back to California, working for the Bank of America as a computer programmer. He died in the San Francisco Bay Area in the year 2000. Kerry Thornley sadly lost most of his friends. It's hard to go bowling with people when you suspect them all of being CIA agents after all, and he eventually moved to Atlanta. He died there in 1998, but even as late as 1994 he was still distributing material in the Discordian tradition. Before the 1994 Super Bowl in the Georgia Dome, for instance, Thornley was posting flyers reading, "Boycott the illegal weapons amnesty program. Don't bring your illegal weapons to the Super Bowl in exchange for tickets." It was a country and western halftime show, so if you heeded the advice, you didn't miss much in any case. Perhaps we could do with more of the original Bavarian Illuminati in the world right now. Rational people pushing reason, science and logic. But for now, we can thank a couple of French Quarter eccentrics for many of the myths surrounding the Illuminati name. At least, that's what my reptilian overlords have told me to say. Thanks for listening.